Yes, ladies and gentlemen, how are you doing today? How's life? Hope you're good. Yeah, I'll be pumping you very regularly and to just keep you up to date on what's trending and what's taking place. I don't know if you have been paying attention on what is happening in our neighbor in the east, that is in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, Congo is it's the biggest country in sub-Saharan Africa, in the region actually, very big. Like it shares a border with over six more other countries. But what is interesting is what is happening in the Congo, because what happens in the Congo kind of um kind of affects what happens in Uganda as well. Now, before we begin the video, please do not forget to like and subscribe to the channel, comment, and give it a thumbs up if you like the work that we do here. Now, in Congo, I think a few days ago, the government declared a state of emergency in the eastern part of Congo, that is in the areas of North Kivu, Ituri, and those areas there. And now those are the areas that border Uganda. Now, when I saw that, it was really interesting to me, of which we still have even a case actually that was, you know, that was the case in the International Criminal Court of Justice, where they are telling Uganda to pay, but that would be a topic for another day. But Uganda has intervened in the Congo since Amini's times, Obote's times, and we all know how all these people ended up. They were all thrown out of power. Now, we have also seen Museveni has intervened in the Congo on several occasions. In the late 90s, when they are overthrowing Mobutu Sese Seko, when they overthrew Mobutu, they orchestrated or they tried it, or they brought, together with Rwanda, they brought a gentleman known as Joseph Kabila into power. Then Joseph Kabila was assassinated, and the son, known as, I've forgotten the president, the former president, uh, came into power, and he ruled the country for quite a number of years until they had elections recently, I think the past 2 years, and he handed over power to Felix Tshisekedi. Now, the violence that has been happening in the Congo has, like, Congo is a motel or is some sort of a hub for rebel groups. That is for Uganda, the ADF, and for some people who, the genocide that happened in Rwanda, some people crossed over and went in the Congo. So it's a hub that, Eastern Congo is the place that harbors so many different types of people in that particular country. And it is one of the most stable regions, although it is one of the most lucrative, with having so many mineral deposits and so many mineral resources that are up for exploitation. Now, I will not be discussing the history of Congo, but I'm here to let you know what is happening today. Now, what happened was the state of emergency was declared because uh, of the ongoing violence in the region, uh, you know, between two groups. But one of the most prominent group that they cited out was the group known as ADF. Now, ADF is Allied Democratic Forces. It is a Ugandan rebel group, as the Congo says, that came into prominence in the early 90s, that was fighting to remove Museveni. Its leader, Jamil Mukuru, was arrested in 2015, and he is in Ugandan cells, being tried in a civilian court, whereas Ugandans who never even picked up arms, the likes of Nubian, who were just musicians, who were arrested for just supporting Bobby Wine, for them they are being charged in a military court, in the general court martial. The irony. I mean, look at that. Jamil Mukulu, a leader of a former leader of the ADF, as they claim, the terrorist group, he is being tried in a civilian court. He had guns, bombs, and everything. Whereas Bobby Wine's counterparts, the likes of Nubian Lee, and all these people are even as young as 23. They are being tried in a general court martial. That is Africa for you. Anyway, that's not the case. The issue is this. Um, let's look at this article just briefly and see. Let's look at the article here and then see. Now, I'll go through for you to understand. This might be a wee bit long episode, but for you to understand this entire thing, we need to look at more than one or two sources in this episode. Now, according to France 24, Dr. Congo declares a state of siege over the worsening violence in the east. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo has announced a state of siege, also known as a state of emergency, late Friday in two provinces in the east of the country, wrecked by violence from armed groups and civilian massacres. Taking into action the gravity of the situation, the president informed the cabinet of his decision to proclaim a state of siege in provinces of North Kivu and Ituri. He said details of what the measures would entail would be released publicly in the next few hours. Under DRR's constitution, the president can declare either a state of emergency or state of siege if severe circumstances immediately threaten the independence or integrity of the national territory, or if they interrupt the regular functioning of institutions. On Thursday, President Felix Tshisekedi said he was preparing radical measures to deal with the security situation in the east of the country. Now, that followed the Prime Minister suggesting on Monday that the state of emergency might be declared in the east, replacing the civilian administration with military administration. An estimated 122 armed groups of varying sizes operate in mineral-rich eastern Congo, eastern DRC. Many are legacy of regional wars in the 90s. In Paris on Tuesday, Felix Tshisekedi asked France for help in eradicating one of them, the Allied Democratic Forces from the Beni region in North Kivu. Now, tear gas and whips. Now, the ADF are a military Islamist fighters who have made their base in eastern Congo since 1995. Branded jihadist organization by Tshisekedi and the United States, the ADF has killed more than 1,200 civilians in Beni area alone since 2017. According to a monitor called the Kivu Security Tracker, the army has conducted operations against them in the region since October 2019, but has not been able to put a stop to the massacres of civilians. On Friday, police and soldiers in Beni used tear gas and whips to disperse high school students protesting the failure. Several dozen students had been camping outside the town hall over the past week, demanding the departure of the UN peacekeeping force MONUSCO and for Tshisekedi to visit the troubled region. Now, I don't know why the kids were protesting for the UN to leave, and yet the area is having a lot of instability. Nevertheless, there are, according to Tshisekedi, there is 122 armed groups in eastern Congo, especially in the area of North Kivu and Ituri provinces. But out of the 122, it is only one group that is being targeted. That is the Allied Democratic Forces that has its links in Uganda. Now, to understand how Tshisekedi comes to this judgment, we shall have to go back a wee bit in time. You all should understand that the ADF is much older than ISIS or Daesh. But all of a sudden, now ADF is being branded as an ISIS. It has links with ISIS. Why? Because when you give it links with ISIS, it has that sort of magnitude that it creates internationally to make the situation even much bigger than it would have been. If you know what I mean, right? So branding ADF ISIS, I'm not saying that the ADF has not committed atrocities. Of course it has. But branding it ISIS is the question we should ask. Why were they branded as ISIS or jihadists and all this kind of thing? Their leader, Jamil Muhukuru, is being arrested, is in Kampala. How has the ADF gotten all this sort of ground to be able to, to reach this sort of power in Eastern Congo? Anyway, to understand the situation in Eastern Congo, we have to look at a few things. First, let us look at an article, because Tshisekedi had to go to even France to ask help from them to intervene in the situation. And we also know he is a very big ally of America. Now, I'll make my judgment analysis on that particular point, but let us first look at this article. This is according to African arguments. The US has placed sanctions on ISIS DRC. Can you imagine ISIS DRC, that Islamic State in Syria and DRC? But does the group really even exist? This is African arguments. So many uh, articles have been written about this issue of ISIS DRC that it is more of a sham. It doesn't really make sense. The Humanitarian wrote about it, saying, also having its qualms about the situation. Are ADF the Islamist scapegoats in the Congo? This was the Humanitarian written in April 2016. So something is completely not right about this entire ADF thing in the Congo. Now, if you read the article by the crisis group about the same situation in the Congo, that says that understanding the new US terrorism designations in Africa, you will find that there is something really shoddy about the US and its counterparts and Tshisekedi and all these people saying that, this is ISIS in the DRC, because that is completely different from a ragtag group of rebels who are just fighting and causing massacres in the region. Now, if you see all these articles, UN experts accuse Congo of general aiding. UN experts accuse Congo general of aiding attacks on civilians. So it is said that, a Congolese general recruited, financed, and armed the elements of a Ugandan Islamist group to kill civilians while he was in charge of a military operation targeting rebels, according to a confidential report to the United Nations Security Council. Now, what do you make of that? What do you make of that? Okay, I'll come to that, but let us look at African arguments first. Now, it says, the US has placed sanctions on ISIS, DRC, but the group, does it even exist? This was written by Robert and Judith. In the recent interviews with the detained ADF rebels, some hadn't even heard of ISIS. This is really weird. On the 20th of March this year, 2021, the US Department of State designated a rebel group operating in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo as a foreign terrorist organization. Referring to it as Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, Democratic Republic of Congo, ISIS DRC, it placed the group under strict sanctions. It suggested that the rebel group, also known as Allied Democratic Forces, has become part of the so-called Islamic State's Central African province and warrants a heightened action. This is where Ugandans and people in the neighboring areas should look. Warrants a heightened action. Now, the announcement, let that sink in. Let that sink in. The announcement comes as US military advisors and the UN peacekeeping mission in the DRC have shown a renewed interest in supporting Congolese forces conducting operations against the ADF. The rebel group has operated in the DRC since the 1990s, long before ISIS gained international prominence. Apparently, the US officials believe that its modus operandi and objectives have shifted now that it's part of a global jihadist movement of ISIS. So all of a sudden, the US says, nah, I think these people are now become ISIS because its leader was a Muslim, and when it was formed, these people were a terrorist group in one way or the other. The article goes, many analysts, however, disagree. Objectives and strategies. Okay, now, how do the analysts disagree on this matter? That are these people really ISIS in the Congo? Are they overrated? Are they over-exaggerated? Let us see. Objectives and strategies. One argument for seeing ADF as part of ISIS is that its objectives and strategies have changed. According to a report by George Washington's University Program on Extremism and Bridgeway Foundation, ADF's current leader, Sekabaluku, has reoriented the group's raison d'etre from overthrowing the Ugandan government to the establishment of an Islamic State inside DRC as part of a global caliphate. My God. So, Sekabaruku, of which Sekabaruku I've never even heard about him, that he is fighting. When did he ever fight to overthrow the government? Well, you should understand that ADF started as an outfit that wanted to overthrow the Museveni government. And then when its leader was arrested in 2015, Jamil Mukulu, Sekabaruku took over. And now Sekabaruku gave up the issues of overthrowing Museveni's government. And now, all of a sudden, Sekabaruku wants to establish an Islamic State in the Democratic Republic of Congo as part of a global caliphate. So Sekabaruku failed to conquer Uganda, but all of a sudden now he wants to conquer the entire world and make it a global caliphate. Now, there's something wrong with this. Either it is the George Washington University, the researchers, or something really fishy with Sekabaruku, Uganda, and the DRC. In making this case, the report cites ADF video in which children can be heard repeating in Arabic, the Islamic State's famous motto, remaining and expanding. It explains that ISIS primary export to its affiliates are its creed, in brackets, Aqidah, and method, manhaj, which includes territorial control and implementing authority. This is often achieved through capturing territory and holding cities and declaring a state. It is questionable, however, as to whether the ADF has truly evolved in this way. The group has never previously shown any interest in capturing territory or even governing civilian population, only a small minority of whom are Muslim. Literally, the ADF, it has just a few people who are even Muslim. Most of these people in the ADF are not even Muslims, by the way. And how would you describe a jihadist group and say that, okay, this is a jihadist group, and yet the majority of the people in it are not even Muslims? It has mostly stayed secluded in the bush. Recent interviews with detained combatants, internal UN intelligence reports on accounts of kidnapped civilians indicate that there are no signs that this has changed. Rather, these sources say that ADF primarily wants to be left alone. Its main message to the local population is that it will stop conducting mass killings when the army holds operations against it. So what this means is that whenever the army attacks the ADF retaliates with attacking civilians. So what the authors of this article say that the ADF wants to be left alone. That if they are not attacked, then they will not, re-attack in one way or the other. This suggests that the rebel group has not adopted the ISIS objective of remaining and expanding, but simply of remaining. In fact, the video cited by the report, the children can only be heard chanting the first half of the phrase, Bakia, which is the same as Swahili Bakia. It is true that within its camps, the ADF has developed extensive governance system with schools, prisons, healthcare structures. All camps inhabitants must abide by strict regulations based on Islamic law, but these purely internal governance structures long predate any links with ISIS. So, what the report from the Washington, the report indicated was that, okay, because these kids are shouting, slogans saying that remaining and expanding, so now they are part of ISIS. Is that how you... So if anyone comes out and starts shouting, remaining and expanding, do they become ISIS? Look, this is something really deep, guys. It's really deep. And I see Museveni lobbyists and Museveni hand written all over this entire thing. Another reason to suggest that ADF is part of ISIS is that it has started to recruit fighters from across the region and has received funding through the foreign ISIS associates. However, both these claims are dubious. Because the report claimed that ADF was receiving funding from ISIS and it was recruiting people around the entire region, Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and all these other places, Tanzania. So, the authors argue that, firstly, ADF has contained fighters from different East African countries for a long time. A UN group of experts report in 2012 documents its recruitment networks operating across Burundi, Uganda, and Tanzania, and notes that the group is increasingly targeting recruits from East Africa. The ADF's former leader, Jamilu Mukulu, was in Tanzania when he was arrested in 2015. Secondly, the evidence of alleged financial links with ISIS appears weak. There were allegations in 2018 that the group received funding through an alleged ISIS money handler in Kenya. but recent UN investigations don't mention these financial links. Much of the evidence of them relies on interviews conducted by Ugandan authorities and must be treated with caution, especially as numerous reports indicate that ADF combatants and suspected collaborators were tortured during interrogation by the Ugandan Security Intelligence Services. Now, I'll just pause here for a while. If you go to this article that was written by URN, it says that state asks for time to disapprove torture of terrorism suspects. So people were beaten. Prosecutors have pleaded for more time to avail a report disproving allegations that 11 of the people charged with terrorism were tortured while in military custody. The accused are, whatever their names are here, are accused of aiding and abetting financial acts of terrorism by rendering support to the ADF. Now, I'll come back to that story and why it matters. So, when you say that these people are being financed and you're what you use to justify that argument is that, oh, we have these Ugandans that were arrested and they said that ADF actually gets funding from ISIS. Now, we all know the situation of Ugandan Muslims today, and that is why I did a video about Mufti Menk when coming to visit Ugandans. If you have a tunic in Uganda, so-called kanza and a beard and a hat, you'll get arrested, beaten, and you'll be beaten to accept that you're a terrorist. That is how they get confessions out of people. People are being waterboarded in the country, and then you say that that is the evidence you're going to use. In any case, external financing is not crucial for ADF's survival. According to recent interviews with detained ADF combatants, the group relies primarily on supplies obtained via looting and business operations in North Kivu. Now, the mode of violence. Don't worry, guys, it's almost done. So the mode of violence, according to the report, the George Washington University report, more evidence of ADF's affiliation with ISIS can be seen in the increase of violence against civilians. It associates a spike in violence in early 2018 with the then ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's first mention of Islamic State Central Africa Province, ISICAP. It adds that these numbers were surpassed in 2019 when ADF was finally recognized publicly by the Islamic State as part of ISICAP. But the correlation is not causation. Moreover, there is much more plausible explanation for these patterns. Both those spikes in violence came immediately after the Congolese army and the UN mission MONUSCO conducted offensive operations against the ADF. Furthermore, the period preceding the 2018 violence was notable for both lack of offensive operations and few rebel attacks against civilians. The most consistent ADF motive for violence continues to be reprisals to discourage offensive operations. Now, it is because these people say that the levels of violence of ADF have increased, but the author of the article argues that, look here, it has not increased, because when you say that al-Baghdadi stood up in 2018 early and mentioned that, look here, there is Islamic State Central Africa Province, and as a matter of fact, the report claims that when al-Baghdadi declared that, the rates of violence increased in Congo. But then this person argues, the author of the article, that look here, but during that period, the UN and MONUSCO attacked ADF. And when they attacked, the ADF attacked back. Because the ADF, when it's being attacked, it goes after civilians. Now, when it goes after civilians, that is used as justification that, look here, these guys are really, really, really for ISIS. Because Baghdadi announced them or talked about them, and now they are attacking, which is interesting anyway. Now, some have also cited that ADF's use of improvised explosive devices, IEDs, as a sign of its ISIS links, as signers of its ISIS links. But in the words of the UN report and officials, these weapons remain very rudimentary and are used for tactical defensive reasons against the army, not as terrorist tool. This stands in sharp contrast with the level of sophistication and function of IEDs used by ISIS. Propaganda links. In the recent years, ISIS central media units have started to claim attacks in the DRC. Meanwhile, the ADF has begun making reference to ISIS in its growing propaganda output. This appears to be evidence of close communications. This appears to be evidence of close communications. Yet, a 2020 UN report found that 35% of the attacks in the DRC claimed by ISIS do not correspond with the actual incidents. Over 50% were inaccurate, misstating locations, dates, or casualty figures. Well, I know someone who misstates dates and casualty figures. Remember the situation in Somalia, 189 Al-Shabaab militants killed at the beginning of this year when Museveni was under pressure, and all of a sudden it happened that the story was fake? So you are telling me what is happening in the Congo, the government in Uganda has nothing to do with it? Well, we shall see. Furthermore, ADF's propaganda remains diverse and at times makes no reference to ISIS at all. Rather than relying on coherent message about being an ISIS affiliate, the group appears to tailor its output to its various networks. Most of its videos are primarily in Swahili and Luganda, suggesting that they are targeting the same East African networks in which ADF has been embedded for decades. For heaven's sakes, they can't even speak Arabic. Recent interviews with detained ADF combatants also indicate that the knowledge of the group's connection to ISIS is uneven. Some even stated they were unaware of the existence of ISIS altogether. This suggests that any links with the Islamic State are part of externally oriented branding rather than a consistently upright internal transformation. Now, the dangers of inaccurate analysis. The US labeling of ADF as ISIS DRC suggests a much more fundamental transformation of the group than the current evidence allows for. This points to the risks of reading too much into propaganda, thereby inflating the significance of the Islamic State. The ISIS DRC narrative also leads to misdiagnosing of the drivers of violence. This is deeply worrying if it contributes to an increase in offensive operations against the ADF, given the rebel group has typically attacked civilians in response to such assaults. Moreover, the Congolese army itself has been implicated in past killings that were attributed to the ADF. Finally, making the struggle against ADF part of the global war on terror forecloses non-violent ways of dealing with the group. The ADF is no doubt a dangerous armed group that needs to be addressed, but the wrong narrative carries with it the wrong solutions. It's interesting, isn't it? Now, that is what led to the fact that now we see Tshisekedi calling on the what do you call it? The French president, Emmanuel Macron, whatever Macron, to intervene in the Congo situation. We also know that Tshisekedi is a very big ally of the United States of America. Now, there are so many players in the Congo region or in the Congo scenario. Now, we see Museveni, because Museveni provides the rebels, the ADF, Tshisekedi enables, like they go and attack these places according to the article I've read for you. And when they attack, the ADF attack back, and they are completely branded ISIS and all this kind of thing. Now, Tshisekedi called on France to intervene, as well as soliciting the help of the Americans. But we know very well that France cannot work alone in this region. We also know that France will need some people or some allies within the region or within Africa to go and help it to fight these insurgents, the ADF guys, in Eastern Congo, in Northern Kivu, as well as the areas of Ituri, but these ones are more in Eastern Congo. Now, the happiest person in all this, of course, is Museveni. And of recent, we know that France is having oil interests in the Lake Albert region in Uganda, because they are the ones that are now going to even construct the pipeline. Now, there's been propaganda that's been making rounds on social media saying that Macron congratulated Museveni. I'm yet to confirm that news. But what it looks like is they are interested in the pipeline, whereby they will finance the pipeline, and they are going to be speaking to Museveni to intervene in the Congo on their behalf, as well as with a few French. So what we are seeing here is that the French are most likely to be leading the offensive in northern Kivu of a small, very small issue that is not even that big, right? And then it will be backed by other Western powers, including US and all these other countries that have interest in the region. Clearly, the people who are going to suffer out of all this is not the ADF terrorists or the ISIS terrorists. No, it is the Congolese, number one. Number two, it is the Ugandans and any other country that is going to get involved. Because this is what is going to happen. The moment Museveni is being called upon to intervene in the Congo, this is what is going to happen in Uganda. Number one, terrorism is going to be brought back at the forefront. People are going to be arrested day and night, especially Muslims. Bombs are going to start exploding. We don't know where, but all this happens usually when the so-called terrorism rhetoric is brought up in the Ugandan discourse. You remember when the Uganda deployed in Somalia, all of a sudden Uganda was on terrorism alert level orange. Everywhere terrorism, this, terrorism, that. And all of a sudden Muslims were being captured and arrested left, right, and center. Now, the direct interference of France means so many things. That is why I tell my Muslim brothers and sisters in Uganda that for you are rubbing shoulders with the dictator. The dictator is looking for every means of survival. Ask yourself one question. Why is Museveni keeping Jamiru Mukuru, the former leader of the ADF? Isn't there the international criminal? If Jamiru Mukuru did these crimes, isn't there the international criminal court? Why isn't he sent there to be charged? Museveni is playing a game. He's playing that game whereby he's at the right time, he will either hand over Jamiru Mukuru and concoct evidence like they did with Dominic Ongwen, of which these people have actually committed the crimes. But the leaders in the region are not after persecuting these people because of the crimes they committed. No, they are after using them as pawns in their international games. You get the point? That's what they do. I won't be surprised for Africa to be like this. I mean, until we have leaders like Museveni who have their own selfish interests, Africa is not going to move a single minute. Because look here, the situation in Congo has hallmarks of Museveni all over the place. Museveni is being chased out of Somalia. He doesn't have anywhere to deploy his troops. At the same time, Uganda is being told to pay the Congo for the money they looted in the late 90s. And at the same time, it is the same gentleman who looted the Congo that they are looking to call upon to come and intervene and help the French to get the so-called ISIS DRC out of Congo. Now, what happens to the 122 other armed groups? So, for them, they are allowed to operate, but ISIS is the biggest threat. It is the same thing that is happening in Mozambique, in the Cabo Delgado region. Because when they label and put this thing of ISIS on you, why is it that, by the way, these things are happening in areas that have so many minerals? Cabo Delgado has one of the biggest deposits of liquid gas offshore in the entire African continent. Northern Kivu is one of the richest places with minerals in Africa, in the Congo. So, other areas, the labels can operate in other areas, but in North Kivu, I think we are going to sort it out. I'm not saying that they shouldn't kick these people out, but the way it is being done, I don't think that it is done with the real intentions of taking these rebels out. Because there are people who profit from terrorism. There are people who profit from ISIS or jihadists, the weapon salesmen, the people who provide the training and all this kind of thing. The so-called military-industrial complex. It is playing out in the African arena. Now, this is going to be another second Congo war that is going to happen. Now, will Museveni be called upon? What is interesting is that the intervention of Museveni it will depend. if the French really congratulated him, then it looks like Museveni is going to be working with the French in the Congo, because Tshisekedi has officially called on uh, Macron to come and help out. And Macron is going to rely on the help of Museveni. If that is a big if he congratulated him. Now, so many deals are happening within Total, with Total as well as Museveni, right? Now, the fact that Museveni is being told to pay this money, this amount of money, what that means is that Macron might be able to convince Tshisekedi to reduce the amount, or to even forget about the money on behalf of Museveni, and tell Museveni, look here, you come and intervene, but I'll tell Macron to, forego these issues of the ICJ and see how we can solve those particular issues. Now, how does Tshisekedi benefit from all this? So, well, they say that what Tshisekedi wants is to, take back the entire region, because this is one of the most profitable area in the eastern part of the Congo. But also the area has so many intricacies, so many tribes and all this kind of thing. It's not an easy area to govern. So while he wants to take control over it, it's not going to be something easy for him. And as things stand, I think, like the humanitarian said, ISIS is being used as a scapegoat, because there is evidence that Congolese generals were aiding ISIS and whatever rebels and these fighters, ADF fighters, to pillage and kill and do all these sorts of crimes to the people of these regions. So in the end, no one is going to benefit. In the end, the local people in the region, the Ugandans and the French and all these countries that are going to intervene, they are not going to benefit out of this. It is just a few people and some corporations that are going to benefit. So that's the situation that's happening in the Congo. We are going to keep monitoring what is going on and seeing what is happening. And when that happens, after looking at what is happening, then we shall come back and let you know any developments that are happening within the region that might affect Uganda, that might affect us. We shall make sure that we bring them to you in one way or the other. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and click the notification button so that you get notifications whenever I make a new video. Most of these things really need deep explanation, and that's why these videos are getting a wee bit longer, but I'll try to shorten them given the fact that we have covered most of the ground. So whenever we come back for another video, we shall just keep on top of what we discussed in the previous video. All right, thank you very much. Tell me what you think about the Congo, and let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed the video, or if you would like to know more about what is happening in Uganda as well as the region and how it affects the country, our country Uganda, that we live in one way or the other. By the way, but by saying that ISIS is in the DRC does not only affect Uganda, but it can even go up to Kenya, go up to Tanzania, go up to Sudan and all these other places. So it's gonna be really, really interesting. All right, enjoy your day and have a great time. Bye bye.